the executive director of the Gay Lesbian Resource Center, could not be with us today. And he is truly sad to have missed this, but he has prepared a statement that I have been honored to read today. And it follows. I regret that I could not be here for Jim's memorial. Jim was a mentor, a friend, and a hero to thousands. The Kalamazoo community, and in fact the entire LGBT community around the state and nation, has lost a true trailblazer and a pioneer to our movement. History will long remember the Harvey Milks and Bayard Rustins of the LGBT equality movement. Kalamazoo will remember our friend Jim as a loving man who faced homophobia and fought it, and who has made the lives of so many LGBT folks better. Most especially our youth. A bit easier because of his work and vision. On behalf of the Resource Center, the board, the staff, and Urvashi Vahid, who wrote this morning to ask that we share her condolences as well. We say thank you to our friend Jim and hope that one day we'll see him again. Again, David was very sad he could not be here today. On a personal note, I did not know Jim, but to reiterate what was said earlier, I live in a better world now. We all live in a better world now because of Jim. And what he did for equality, what he did for this community is a call for action for all of us. And I hope that we can all live up to that. Thank you.
Hello, my name's PJ, and I was on CARE's staff in the 90s, and the Tracy, Cyril, Patty Ressler, Renee Mayavi, Terry, Karen Eddie's out there, Maggie. I'm drawing a blank on your name, but the nurse who actually encouraged me to try out for the job. I was a volunteer coordinator, and in those early days of HIV, AIDS, and CARES, we had a dual-fold role. We had people coming home to say, Mom, Dad, I'm gay. Mom, Dad, I'm HIV positive. And those of us who worked at CARES and those who worked in the medical field, when you told people where you worked, it stepped back. It was different. There was stigmas. There was stigmas because you were gay. There was stigmas because you had an infectious disease that nobody knew a lot about. And so, in the midst of all that, all these fabulous people were attracted to CARES. And a big reason for that was CARE's own Buddha, Jim Knox. Because his life out here, you said something about his gruff nature. Well, I hate to tell you, but we got the Buddha. We got the Buddha. Because it wasn't always easy. And those of you who remember me and shared those times with us in those years, it wasn't easy. Cyril wasn't always easy. I wasn't always easy. Tracy, you know, but we did a hell of a good job. But it wasn't easy because we were pioneering. We really were pioneering. And in the center of all that was Buddha, was Jim Knox. And I think of him now, and I think of all the lives, you know, the parents, the people we serve, participants, never called them clients, never called them patients. The hundreds of volunteers, Jeff, I mean, you're here, a lot of you are here. And I see him sitting in the center, and there's a Frost poem, and unfortunately I don't have it, but if I did, I would read it to you because it's about being the center of the circle. Sort of like John Lennon sitting here watching the wheels go round and round. But Jim Knox also made those wheels go round and round. And so on behalf of those of us from the 90s, the CARES family, you know, we had Buddha. We had Buddha in our midst. And everybody's better for that. Everybody. And on the other side, too. Thank you.
Hello. My name is Richard Pyatt. I'm the board president to which David referred. And as such, I get to be in pretty esteemed company because Jim, as you heard, was the board president for 20 years, and there's been one in between the two of us. But as such, I think my predecessor would agree, whenever we needed a check step, just a point of reference from someone who had a full perspective, I think they call it institutional memory, we would turn to Jim for that. And so it's going to be a little difficult not to be able to do that now. Recently, the first 5 months of this year, I was working on a project for CARES, and so was Jim. And we had the opportunity to see each other 4 or 5 times a month, which was quite a bit. And on the first couple of occasions we met, I happened to be wearing a dark suit. And on the second occasion, the suit happened to be black. And Jim, I could see, was looking at me, and brow was a little furrowed, and he said, "You look like a funeral director." And so I was thinking about what I was going to put on today, and I had a notion to put on the black suit because, in a way, that's part of how I feel about what's happened. As you can see, I didn't. I thought about that for a moment, actually, about funeral director. Well, that's not so bad. I'm a 6 Feet Under fan. They make more than radio people, I think. But anyway, I changed my mind. And so for you, Jim, today I wear the brightest suit I own.
My name is Tom Seiler. For many years, at least 10, Jim and I served on the board of the Kalamazoo Gillespie Resource Center. I got to know him well, and I got to know a man of extraordinary kind of checks and balances. Jim was capable of viewing the grand scheme of things, and at the same time was a master of details. If you wanted to know all the rules and regulations for handling mailings, Jim knew. If you wanted to know when a license had to be renewed and exactly how to go about it, Jim knew. He was also someone whom I think of as an unusual activist. And I mean that in the sense that for those of us who have been engaged in one or another kind of activism, whether it's LGBT activism or AIDS activism, there is a high percentage of burnout. One tires. One works hard, as Jim worked hard, to effect change. Some of us are old enough to remember when he would send around a letter as we neared election time, reminding us that some candidates were in favor of progressive action and others were opposed. Vote your own, whatever you want, he would say. But please vote and bear in mind these candidates. No one else was doing that. As Jim worked and he effected change, it means that, in a sense, the ground that you have worked to establish is changing. Many people find that difficult to deal with. As the change comes along, they step aside, someone else takes over. Jim changed along with the change. An extraordinary talent. He and I, a couple of years ago, went to the Creating Change Conference in Detroit. From early in the day until late in the evening, Jim attended sessions, learning from young people 30 years younger than he, who were 3 years into some sort of career as an activist. He was 30 years into it. But he kept learning. always, always learning. He also was, this is an aside, perhaps the worst driver. Driving on I-94, Jim Knox behind the wheel, because he had difficulty getting into someone else's car, was a truly terrifying experience. 35 miles an hour, just coming out of the city of Detroit. It was, I'm only 35. I said when I was interviewed for the article in Between the Lines, that one of the things that I found most remarkable about Jim Knox, was that for all of his labors, it was never about Jim. It was about caring for people who needed to be cared for. It was about fighting for the rights of people whose rights were threatened or denied. He never sent a gift to a cause without sending it in dedication to someone else. His generosity was to not just financial, but emotional. Incredibly supportive, and incredibly generous, and incredibly honorable, and an incredibly humble man. Our community cannot really spare that kind of humanity. It was a pleasure to know him.
I knew Jim many years ago in the 80s and through the Resource Center. Then I went away for about 20 years with no good excuse. I came back 2 years ago because I was recruited to head the board and to build up the board and so on. And I finally said yes to something that I wanted to do for a long time. Jim Knox and Tom Sadler were there to greet me. And I have thanked them dozens of times each for holding the place together and welcoming some newcomers such as myself. They were there when nobody else was there. Nobody cared about it. And there were a number of kind of bad patches like that, but to my knowledge, Jim and Tom were always there. I loved Jim Knox from the beginning, this time. He welcomed me with open arms and told me, and this is what captured my heart forever. He told me he was the founding mother of the Kalamazoo Gay and Lesbian Resource Center. I had been complaining, of course, about the dominance of men and, you know, how it was all guys and so on. And he was the founding mother. Through the last couple of years, he's guided me, and indeed, I just wrote him a note asking his advice, and it must have hit the hospital the day he died because it was returned to me. I wanted advice because, once again, the Resource Center was turning over the CEO, David Garcia, and I wanted Jim to be the first to know after David and me. So I put in the note that he was the third to know, it was not to tell anybody, and I would be by to see him. I have been calling the hospital every couple of days for the last few weeks of Jim's life, and I got the nurses feeling really sorry for me, but they still wouldn't let me in to see him. I hope Jim knew how much I loved him and that I was still calling him my mother.